So it is now 11 a.m. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. It is 11 o'clock, and I'll call this meeting to order. Just checking around. It looks like people are still logging in. I know that Ryan Maynard sent a note that he's away at training and would be unable to join us. Judge Doyle is presiding over a trial, so he probably won't be with us today. And as many of you know, Jerry Wild was promoted to COO of CCADV, so she had to step away from this assignment due to her promotion. And CJ Forcier from Family Relations retired, so I believe that we may be welcoming some new members aboard. If we could go around and introduce ourselves, I'll begin. I am Gail Hardy. I am the Chief State's Attorney's designee and also the co-chair of this subcommittee. Nancy?
Hi, Nancy Tyler, and I am an attorney in Hartford, and I am the survivor advocate appointed by CCADV to this council.
Thank you. Good to see you this morning. Joe?
Good morning. I'm Joe DeTuno. I'm the Director of Family Services, part of the Connecticut Judicial Branch.
Thank you, and good morning, Joe. Merritt?
Good morning, Merritt LaJoy, the Complaint Officer for the Office of the Victim Advocate.
Good morning. Andrea?
Good morning, everyone. Andrea O'Connor, Family Violence Victim Advocate Program Manager for the Umbrella Center for Domestic Violence Services. I supervise the court-based victim advocacy program for New Haven, Milford, and Derby. Good morning.
Good morning. Captain LaRock?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Heather LaRock. I am a captain with the Windsor Police Department and currently the commander of the patrol division here.
Chief Rosado?
Good morning, Rob Rosado, Chief of Police in Meriden, also president of CPCA.
And Nancy Turner.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. I am on the Board of Pardons and Parole, representing the board on this committee and the larger advisory committee.
Thank you. And Andrea Deo.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrea Deo. I am the Director of Law Enforcement Services for Connecticut Coalition.
Welcome. And Brittany?
Hi, everyone. My name is Brittany Broberg. I'm the Criminal Legal Advocacy Manager over here at CCADV, and I'm just tuning in just for curiosity's sake.
Well, welcome. And as I stated, Jerry Wild had to step away, and I can't do this work on my own. It would seem that the next most reasonable person to step into Jerry's shoes on this committee is the person who stepped into her shoes at CCADV, and that is Shauna Harrington. And unless there are nominations from the floor, I would be nominating Shauna Harrington to serve as co-chair on this subcommittee. Are there any objections to Shauna being the co-chair? Or are there nominations from the floor?
I second the nomination of Shauna Harrington.
All in favor of Shauna Harrington being co-chair of this subcommittee signify by saying aye or
Aye.
Aye.
any opposed? Any opposed? No. Shauna, will you come on and just introduce yourself to the group?
Hi folks, I'm Shauna Harrington. Hopefully I'm a familiar face. I have been at the large council meetings and I was co-chairing the offender program subcommittee. Happy to be here. I'm the director of legal advocacy at CCADV. I've been here for a little over a year now, but prior to my role here, I served as a court-based victim advocate in New London and Danielson. So thanks for having me.
Welcome and congratulations.
Thank you.
And Mark, welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and I'll just express my gratitude that other members have shared to Shauna for the role that she has performed in supporting the efforts of the whole advisory council and our subcommittee, and grateful to her for stepping up in this way to serve with Attorney Hardy as subcommittee chair, and I'm looking forward to working with her better. It's been great to learn about her experience and her work and her efforts, and in this new capacity, it will be even better, and I look forward to it. I'm Mark from Judicial Branch Office of Victim Services. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning and welcome. Have I missed anyone? So next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Last evening, we received an amendment to the minutes that were sent out under the title of other business, and that was our farewell to our friend CJ Forcier. Has everyone received the minutes, and has everyone had an opportunity to review them? And if so, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion, any additions, deletions, corrections that need to be made? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye or waving.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion or the minutes are approved as the motion carries. Next on the agenda is a recap of the larger council recommendations and next steps. Shauna, would you like to jump in on this, and if you could share with us any information that you may have received from Megan Scanlon as to what our next steps should be with respect to the recommendations that were submitted.
Sure. I don't have a whole lot of information about next steps. I do know that our next larger council meeting is next Wednesday. If folks don't have that saved, let me grab the time for you. From 12:30 to 2. And it looks like it is a hybrid meeting. So there will be a Zoom link, and room 2D as in dog is saved for us. So I believe we'll get some more information at that point about next steps. But I know that Gail and we met with Darren Mitchell yesterday to discuss our recommendation about bringing him back to work around firearm safety and seizure. So I don't know, Gail, if you want to speak more about that or. Sure.
So as you all are aware, we made 3 recommendations from this subcommittee. And one of the recommendations was to bring Darren Mitchell back and to give us some guidance on abusers' access to firearms, and also on how to improve our response to domestic violence as it relates to ensuring that the orders of protection are adhered to. So on yesterday, Shauna and I met virtually with Darren Mitchell to see if he would be open to giving us some feedback of his experience from the work that he's done around the country with respect to assisting teams like ours in setting up a system to ensure that offenders are in compliance with the orders of protection, especially the orders to surrender their firearms. As you all may recall, last year he presented to the larger council, and there were a number of persons around the table who mentioned that we could benefit from Darren Mitchell coming back. He is working under a grant, and the grant that he's working under is due to run out, I believe, in May or June, but he indicates that he has another grant on the horizon. I sort of thought that grants and thoughts of grants or speaking of grants was probably taboo at this point, but he seems to believe that his grants will be approved and he will be able to continue his work. He indicated that the grant that is currently in place is primarily for work in the civil courts. Shauna and I agreed that there's work to be done in our civil courts, and as well as in our criminal courts. So he agreed that the crossover would work and he would still be in compliance with his grant. He indicated also that these types of trainings work when everyone is at the table, when all the partners are at the table. He mentioned the usual partners like, judicial or judge, and also thought that if there's a judge who's willing to champion our proposals and our project, that usually goes further. Usually law enforcement's at the table, probation, parole, prosecutors. He said those are the usual participants. He mentioned that we might want to bring some outside parties in, and from that, I assumed he was speaking about like our providers from offender programs and so on. But we were trying to narrow down when we would like to either bring him up or get a discussion going at least. And Shauna and I wanted to wait until we meet with the larger group, just to make sure that we're going in the right direction. I would also like to hear from the other subcommittees, offender programs, model policy, just to see if they could make use of Darren's work as well, or his input. again, because he's funded under a grant, it wouldn't cost us anything. He indicated if we were interested in bringing him up personally, because he's in the Maryland, DC area, he would just be asking for transportation costs or maybe hotel and so on. And Shauna and I both thought that between our two agencies that would be doable. But we were looking at somewhere around April, the end of April, and he would have to check with his family. I believe he has some travel plans scheduled. Does anyone have any comments with respect to bringing Darren Mitchell back to Connecticut to assist us? One of the things that he mentioned when he presented to the larger group was sort of setting up a pilot site, one of our jurisdictions where we thought a pilot could work best. So that would be one of the things that I'd be interested in discussing with this group. Are there any questions or comments? I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Gail, can I just put a note out there that April 7th through the 11th, it's actually 6th through the 12th, is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. So probably not a good time. Our office will be pretty busy that week, and I don't know what other celebrations are happening at this point, but if we can avoid that week, that probably would be good.
Yes, thank you, Merritt. I know he was looking at the week of April 20th, and he indicated it would be probably 2 days, 20th and 21st, or that Tuesday and Wednesday. But again, he would be getting back to Shauna and to me. Any other comments, questions, or just information that you'd like to offer?
I think it's a great idea, Gail. I mean, we've been kind of waiting on this for a while. I know the branch and our representatives are, we've been at this for a while with Jerry, and it'd be great to hear his perspective of what we can do in Connecticut. So I'm all for it.
Great. Mark?
It sounds to me great that we that without additional expense on from this council, we're able to tap into this expertise and resource. I was pondering in my mind about for the role of the subcommittees versus the full advisory council, and how exactly to kind of prioritize a kind of schedule and work plan for him and kind of develop key questions. It feels to me that the advisory council contains the right partners around the table. I don't know what others' reactions are to that. Wondering if there isn't some way to use the full advisory council to sort of maximize our time with him and lay out a research agenda and lay out a timeline, and maybe the subcommittees can develop sort of input for what we actually ask, but the execution occurs at the full advisory council. Those are just ideas I've been processing. I'm learning of this, as you describe it, Gail. So sorry if my thoughts are kind of muddled, but sort of where I sit right now after taking this in, those are the ideas that came to mind.
And yes, Mark, and thank you for that. I recall when he presented to us, and he presented virtually to the larger council, and I was seated next to Megan, and at this subcommittee's meeting, Megan stepped in place of Jerry. And during his presentation, Megan said, I wish that we knew about him before we had our subcommittee meeting. So I know that the larger council will make use of him. I think everyone applauded his presentation on that day, and we will be going back to Senator Flexer and to Megan prior to our larger meeting, just, so that we can report to them how we're proceeding on the recommendations that we've made.
Gail, is
Good.
there any way to get input from him before the actual meeting so that we can gather information that he might need from us? Again, as Mark said, so we can maximize the time we have with him?
Yes, that would, that makes a whole lot of sense. As I mentioned, Shauna and I actually, sort of on a whim, we said, let's reach out to him and just see if he's willing to talk to us, if he could give us some insight on whether or not he'd be willing to come back. And, it just so happened that he was, available at that, right at that time, and he would have spoken to us that day. So actually we have him providing us with, the different types of services that he offered. He mentioned a couple of states that he's working with that he's assisted in ensuring that orders of protection were complied with, that firearm surrender actually went through as it was expected. One of the things that this subcommittee spoke about early on, I believe Judge Doyle was a part of the conversation, and it was primarily a discussion between Jerry and I, but we talked about having somebody who was either embedded in the prosecutor's office to ensure that when a court ordered a defendant to turn over firearms, that there would be someone in the prosecutor's office, like an investigator or an inspector, or just someone to make sure that they got in contact with the police departments to make sure that that person actually complied, because that was a concern of some of the victims, that the way that our firearms registry is set up, that victims can't call up and request information as to whether a person who was under an order remained in compliance. And I believe it was Brianna who presented to us and told us the limitations on those persons who actually have access to the registry and to compliance. So Darren actually mentioned that, we would want to look into that. He was just, brainstorming and giving us information about things that we should sort of think about in the meantime, between now and April or May or whenever we get back together. So, yeah, Shauna and I will be in touch with him. And if you guys have suggestions or if you have questions, if you could forward those questions to us, it would be helpful.
And Gail, if he is coming in April, maybe we can do a pre-call with him just so that we can give him kind of our struggles. I mean, what we see as barriers, and just so he has an idea so we can kind of talk about what happens in other, states or other regions and how it can be applied in Connecticut in a way where, I think the biggest concern across the board is bringing people back to court multiple times. And other challenges, right? Judge Doyle brought up some constitutional problems and things like that. But if we could have a pre-call, not a long one, but just to give him kind of the lay of the land of what we've done so far, I think that would be very helpful. That when he does come, he'll kind of know the groundwork, so we're not starting from ground zero when he comes. I think that might be something you might have put into the equation.
Thank you, Joe.
Might we invite him to the March subcommittee meeting over Zoom?
Sure. Who was that?
Nancy Turner.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, he's actually willing to do that as well. And again, what I'd like to do is talk to Megan and Senator Flexer, because they too may want to be part of this call, as well as Karen O'Connor, who is the chair of model policy. So, maybe again, it would make sense to speak with Megan, speak with Senator Flexer to see whether or not maybe a smaller group from the larger advisory council would want to meet virtually with him, again, to discuss some of the challenges that we experience here in Connecticut. So going along with...
Can I just add one more thing, Gail, if you don't mind?
Sure.
So I was just thinking, if he's done work in other states, if we could get those documents so we could actually see him ahead of time, because a lot of those documents might contain information that would be helpful for us when we speak with him. So if you could provide us with that, that'd be great.
Okay, great. Any other recommendations or suggestions? Okay. And just moving along with the other recommendations that were included in our report. Number 2 was to establish a protocol within each judicial district.
This meeting is being recorded.
For the review, execution, and tracking of domestic violence arrest warrants. And I will let this group know that the Division of Criminal Justice is really moving ahead quickly after a couple of hiccups with getting our case management system to address or to include domestic violence arrest warrants, so that we can track them, so that we can track when those warrants were received, and the person who's reviewing the warrant, including the date that the warrant came in, that it was forwarded to a judge, the date that it came back from a judge, the date that it went back to a police department. If corrections were recommended, there's a place in our case management system where that can also be noted. And in that way, we have an opportunity to prioritize domestic violence warrants and ensure that a specific person is reviewing that warrant and making sure that it gets back to the police department. I think one of our challenges that we also discussed in this group was in ensuring that once it gets back to the police department, that there's some follow-up on making sure that the police are executing that warrant. And I don't know if Chief Rosado has some information about how it's handled in Meriden. I know that Ryan Maynard, he presented to this group, and we also have Captain LaRock, and I believe they gave us information previously about how it's handled. But if you guys want to chime in and tell us what happens in your jurisdiction with domestic violence warrants, if you know.
Well, I mean, it varies from agency to agency about what our policies and procedures are regarding warrant service, but I can say in Windsor, those are priority warrants. So once they are returned, if it's a serious case, we will give the prosecutor a heads up and the inspector and say, hey, can you get this, expedited up there because it's a relatively serious case. If it's not, right, the lesser violent issues, then it would be upon the officer to get that done as soon as possible. As soon as it's returned to court, the onus is on them to make attempts to serve it and document those attempts in our records management system. So under that case, they get assigned a task, and it says serve warrant, and they need to document like with basically follow-ups under that case number that they have made attempts to serve it. Sometimes there's difficulty in serving it, so we'll ask our detectives to give us a hand if they need to go out of a jurisdiction or to try to track somebody down. So those are one of the warrants that we don't let sit. There's a few that there's a handful of them that we don't let sit, and domestic violence is one of them.
So Captain LaRock, do you know the percentage of your warrants, your DV warrants, that are walked through? You guys go to Manchester?
No, we use Hartford.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So mercifully, a smaller percentage, which is a good thing, right? We're talking about serious violent felonies that we would walk through, especially in a situation where the victim is, in danger and, it's an active case. So it really I don't have a percentage for you.
Okay.
But more often than not, we're not walking them through, quite frankly, unless there's some sense of urgency or a heightened danger to the victim.
Do you know what your turnaround is? Like, is it, a week or two or days or?
That depends on the GA and how busy they are, quite frankly, but it is about a week or two.
Okay.
There really is no set definitive. It's literally based on how many warrants they have on their desk to review, and we all know they get backed up because our GAs are busy.
I do have a question. For your department, I know in some departments, when they try to serve the warrant, they write a supplemental report that they made attempts. Does your department do that, or is just an attempt made and then does that supplemental report get sent to the courts?
The supplemental report does not get sent to the court. The reports don't go to the court until the arrest is made. The attempts to serve it are an internal checks and balances so that our supervisors have a heads up. Hey, Sarge, you've got these many warrants on your shift that your guys need to serve. Let's get officer so-and-so to serve that warrant. We have a records management system. There's a case management segment where you can assign tasks to an officer, complete a supplement, serve the warrant. So that's an internal check for us. The supplement gets done when the arrest is made. However, there are notes put in the computer under that case that document the attempts to serve the warrants and dates.
Thank you.
We're very similar to, I think every agency across the state probably handles this kind of very in a similar way. We all treat this with very lot of delicacy here because of the circumstances. I don't think there's a lot of cases where we walk through, but certainly if there's a case that we feel is very important and the need to walk through, we will walk it through. There's been cases where we felt that the victim was in harm's way, where we provided services in the community, had an officer outside the door of an officer or an officer outside the door of the victim. So there's different manners and way we serve these or care for these investigations. And obviously each investigation is very unique. So I just want to keep that, make you all aware of that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Neil, it's not really a question, just a comment. And I'm not responsible for the quote, but I heard it and I believe it. And I think it's pretty well known around that every domestic violence case should be considered a potential homicide. So even if we have a warrant that doesn't have serious charges, we know domestic violence can be a volatile situation. And I think every domestic violence warrant needs to be walked through and expedited, because I do believe we're missing something if we don't do that, because we know the potential in these cases. And I think that has to be our starting point. It has to be our starting point. If it's not, we're already behind. And that's my opinion.
Andrea or Shauna, do you want to address what you're either hearing from victims or you're seeing in your courts?
I'll let Andrea go. I know that not too long ago, there was maybe some backlog that she had experienced in one of her courts.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a backlog. I mean, like, someone was saying earlier, I mean, the GAs definitely have, a huge stack of warrants, and depending on how many come through that week and how many are on their desk is kind of when they get signed. Sometimes, there is a priority that some do get walked through, but some domestics do, depending on the charges and the high risk to the victim. But if they're just, not to, minimize the situation, of course, but if they're just the run-of-the-mill, breach of peace, assault 3 charges, those are not walked through and those go through the regular warrant process. And the turnaround for, the signatures can be, 1 to 2, maybe 3 weeks. And then to get it serviced in, a very busy, high populated town, they could not be serviced right away. And for our arraignments, when we're getting warrants as arraignments, I've seen things that, happened a month ago, and I've seen things that's happened, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, even up to a year or two. So sometimes there's kind of no rhyme or reason, and a lot of these people are getting served when they come to the attention of the police in some way. Our police departments definitely do warrant runs as well. So then we'll get like a high volume one day. So to kind of put a number on it, to kind of put a range on it, would be really difficult. But recently, I will say we definitely had a kind of an abnormal backlog. But I think we're coming out of that now. And we're doing okay. But I want to say from application to being active, maybe 2 weeks if I had to put a number on it. But service in a high volume area can be difficult. It's hard to find these guys.
And I know it varies from victim to victim, but do you receive a lot of contact from victims asking, what's going on? Do you know if he's been arrested yet or if they found him?
We do, and unfortunately, we don't have access to the status of warrants. So we have to redirect them to the officer that they made the complaint to get the status of where the warrant is in the process, because we don't have access to that information. But we make sure that we have their right number, and we assure them that once it does come in as an arraignment, that they will be hearing from our office and that this is what the process looks like. And obviously we can refer back to our agency for, other services, depending on, if safety is an issue, restraining order in the meantime, shelter in the meantime, whatever it may be. But there are a lot of times where they may not know our office exists until that arraignment is there. And that's when we're, reaching out. But there are times where, clients will call us and say, hey, do you know anything? And unfortunately, we don't know anything until that report comes in as an arraignment.
Shauna, are you hearing from other advocates across the state?
Yeah, I think this is just another one of those things that kind of varies from court to court. Sometimes courts do experience a backlog like Andrea's did. Other times I don't hear that anyone is experiencing that. So I think like Merritt said, there is definitely a gap somewhere that needs to be addressed and some uniformity, but
So, hopefully and thankfully, here at the Division of Criminal Justice, we're trying to do our, little part as it relates to getting our case management system to at least accept these entries concerning arrest warrants, when they come through, when they get served, if there's an issue and they have to go back, just doing some follow-up. And, and we will continue talking to them about not letting these warrants sit, pass those warrants off to someone else if, either you're on trial or, you can't get to those warrants because you don't know, what cases are in the basket of warrants that they have. So our third recommendation that we made to the larger council was to establish a consistent practice statewide for domestic violence victims to request that their addresses be protected from defendants in criminal cases. And, as you all know, that's something that we're working on with judicial to try to get some uniformity across the state. So,
Kelly, you're talking about the confidentiality form?
yes.
So I met with Judge Gold this morning. This matter has been with our legal services. They are working on a statute change relative to you have to find a way to seal that address in the file, which makes it kind of complicated. But we're moving along pretty quickly, and our hope is, and I'm not promising, but our hope is that we have some statutory language for probably to put in a court ops bill or a bill that our external affairs thinks it's the right way to go, or we could do it from this council. I'm just not sure how that all works, but Liza and our external affairs can hopefully figure that out. We're kind of in the home stretch of it. It looks pretty promising, but it just needs a few more tweaks before we can kind of formally go through it.
Thank you, Joe. Does anyone have any questions for Joe? So, that's it with respect to the recommendations that we made. Hopefully next week at the larger council meeting, we'll get some idea on, where we go from here, and our efforts to bring Darren Mitchell back. So, if you join next week's meeting, or if you're unable to join, I will make sure that you receive the feedback that I get from the co-chairs of the larger council. Moving on in our agenda, is there any other business that we need to address? I know, Joe, that we lost CJ Forcier. Are you going to be our person?
Now, there's going to be a new regional manager that comes on that takes his place, and I'm assuming that that individual will join as the replacement. I may ask Danielle Sanquidolce to jump on and do it, but I think that a lot of times the next regional manager is going to be more responsible for some of the criminal aspects of our work. Danielle oversees most of the family court things, so I'm thinking it's going to be the regional manager, but that has to go through Judge Bizzuto.
Is there any other business that this committee needs to address? Are there any announcements that anyone would like to make as it relates to this subcommittee? So we're moving right along. Announcements of time and dates of next meeting. Shauna sent out an email. As you all know, the legislative season is in full swing. So it appears that until April, our meetings will be virtual. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is March 19th. It will be virtual only. And our meeting in April will be hybrid. So we will be back at the LOB, and those of you who can't attend in person can join virtually. Is there any other information, questions? If there is no other business that we need to address, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Stay warm, stay off the ice, and stay safe. And we will see you next week at our larger council meeting. Have a good afternoon. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you all.